BC, Joshua fought the kings of Canaan between Gabaon and Azekah, near today's Emmaus. According to the book of Joshua, the sun and the moon stopped above the Ayalon valley, so that the Israelites would be victorious and the darkness would not conceal their enemies. Joshua divided the promised land between the 12 tribes of Israel, and the territory where Emmaus is today was given to the tribe of Dan. The first historical mention of Emmaus is connected to the Jewish revolt against the Hellenization of the region imposed on Judea by the Syrian king Antiochus IV. The uprising, which began in 167 BC, was led by Mattathias Hasmoneus and his son Judas the Maccabee, who came from the village of Modin, 10 kilometers north of Emmaus. One great battle pitched the army of Judas Maccabee against the army of the Seleucids in the plain of Emmaus, where the latter had established their camp. A few years later, the Seleucid army recaptured Emmaus, and General Bacchides erected a fortress to protect his strategic place. During the First Roman period, from the year 63 to the year 4 BC, Emmaus became an administrative center that was more important than Gezer, at the foot of which passed the Via Maris. Joseph Flavius, a Jewish historian, often mentions this township, which afforded the Roman armies the advantages of its geographical situation. After the death of Herod the Great, the country entered into an unsettled period. This was marked by rebellions throughout the country that were severely repressed by the Romans. In 4 BC, Emmaus was in fact razed and burnt down under the orders of the general Varus in retaliation for the attack on a Roman garrison by a Jewish outlaw named Achongus. This is why at the time of Jesus, Emmaus was only a village. About 30 AD, Jesus appeared after his resurrection to 2 of his disciples on their way to Emmaus, and explained the scriptures to them. They recognized him after his breaking of the bread at Cleopas' house in Emmaus. From the Gospel according to St. Luke. Now that same day, 2 of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 160 stadia from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, "Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened there in these days?" "What things?" he asked. "About Jesus of Nazareth," they replied. "He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it is the 3rd day since all this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning, but didn't find his body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see Jesus." He said to them, "How foolish you are, and how slow to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scripture concerning himself. As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus continued on as if he were going farther. But they urged him strongly, "Stay with us, for it is nearly evening. The day is almost over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table, he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. They asked each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the scripture to us?" They got up and returned at once to Jerusalem. There they found the 11 and those with them assembled together and saying, "It is true, the Lord has risen and appeared to Simon." Then the two told what had happened on the way, and how Jesus was recognized by them when he broke the bread.
Most existing ancient manuscripts of the Gospel of Luke bear the distance of 60 stadia, which is 7 miles or 12 kilometers between Jerusalem and Emmaus. Nevertheless, according to several ancient Gospel manuscripts, including the Codex Sinaiticus, the distance between Jerusalem and Emmaus is approximately 160 stadia, which is about 19 miles or 30 kilometers, which corresponds to the location of Emmaus Nicopolis. This is the same distance we find in some ancient Latin translations, including the Vetus Latina and the Vulgate, as well as in the Aramaic and the Armenian translations. Most existing ancient manuscripts of the Gospel have the variant of 60 stadia, apparently as a result of a centuries-aged tendency which existed among the scribes to correct the distance in order to simplify the understanding of the text.
As early as 66 AD, the village grew and became the country town of a toparchy. The Talmud mentions a cattle market at Emmaus, where important figures of the time used to meet.
During 2 Jewish rebellions in 70 and 135 AD, the armies of Vespasian and then of Hadrian installed a military camp in Emmaus, surrounded by a wall. Numerous gravestones were found in the surroundings, with mention of soldiers from the 5th Macedonian Legion and the 6th cohort of Petra. Between 221 and 222 AD, remembering Emmaus' role in the Roman victory, the Emperor Elagabalus raised the town of Emmaus to the rank of city through the embassy of Julius Africanus. It is then that the place received the name of Nicopolis, the city of victory in Greek.
Nicopolis. City Ay, sorry.
After the Edict of Milan in 313 AD, Nicopolis played an important role as both a holy site and an episcopal see. Peter of Nicopolis is the first known bishop of the town. He is on the list of the signatories of the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. Located on the main road leading to the Holy City, Nicopolis is mentioned as early as 333 AD by pilgrims. During the Byzantine period, between the 4th and 7th centuries, a vast church complex, including 2 basilicas, a cruciform baptistry basin, and several adjoining buildings, was built in stages. Pilgrims came here to venerate the site of Cleophas' house, where the breaking of the bread had taken place, to bathe in the miraculous spring where Jesus had washed his feet, and to venerate the relics of St. Cleophas, who was martyred in his house at Emmaus. In 508 AD, St. Sabas, one of the main figures of the Palestinian monasticism, faced a rebellion in his monastery. He had to seek refuge in Nicopolis, where he founded a new monastery.
Tandaan niyo si Saint Saba?
Movie?
Judean Desert?
Ganyan?
Okay.
Sa map Saba.
Si Saint Jerome at si Paula. Tandaan niyo?
Ano niya, no? Yung sa Bethlehem.
Sa Bethlehem. Yung sa ilalim ng Nativity Church.
Disciple ni Saint Jerome
Saint
si
Jerome.
Paula.
Beginning of the Umayyad period in the 7th century AD, the Arabs reused the former name Emmaus, transforming it into Emmaus. According to the medieval Arab geographer Al-Muqaddasi, for a short time the town was a district city. However, in the year 18 of the Hejra, or 639 AD, a great plague, starting from one of the wells, killed more than 25,000 Muslims, leading to a massive evacuation of the village. The great caliph then moved to Lud before establishing the town of Ramleh. Nevertheless, pilgrims still came in number to the sanctuary.
Breaking bread.
On June 6, 1099, Emmaus was the last stop of the First Crusade before the capture of Jerusalem. According to Albert of Aix, a historian of the Crusades, the army led by Godfrey de Bouillon settled there, the last encampment of their long pilgrimage. However, a strange restlessness was taking place in the camp of Nicopolis. Under the tents, none could sleep. In the Crusader period, the site was enriched by a Romanesque church, using the formal central apse from the Byzantine period. The Knights Templar, who were the owners of the place, still commemorated here the appearance of Jesus to the disciples of Emmaus. However, they were more interested in the hill of Latruth, where they erected a fortress, the Turon of the Knights.
Until the Middle Ages, the measurement for the distance given in the Gospel between Jerusalem and Emmaus was 160 stadia. It was later revised and began to be accepted as 60 stadia, which is 11.5 kilometers, or 7 miles. Thus, by 1141 AD, pilgrims headed for another village called Kiryat Elena, which is the biblical Kiryat Yarim and the present village of Abu Ghosh, to celebrate the memory of Emmaus in the Romanesque Basilica of the Order of the Hospitallers. Since the 14th century, a different road was used by the pilgrims on their way to Jerusalem. This change provoked the appearance of a third Emmaus in Kobebe near Mount Joy. As for the Crusaders' Church of Emmaus, it became the place for another devotion. Boniface of Ragusa noticed in 1555 that in Emmaus, the place and the church are called the Maccabees, since it is where they were born and were buried after their triumph. Pilgrim, you are free to enter this church and to call upon the holy martyrs. Later on, it was venerated as a burial site of the 7 Maccabee brothers, who were put to death in Antioch and declared proto-martyrs by the church. This devotion probably came from the commemoration of Judas the Maccabee and was prevalent until the end of the 19th century.
The famous explorer and Palestine expert Edward Robinson was the first to identify, in the mid-19th century, the ruins of the basilica near the Arabic village of Emmaus as the former Emmaus Nicopolis. However, the restoration of the site really began in May 1878. when Saint Miriam Bawardi, a Carmelite nun from Bethlehem, identified the remains as those of the place where Jesus was recognized by the 2 disciples. Berthe d'Artigot, a benefactress of Carmel, bought the land for the monastery. Soon afterwards, archaeological and historical researches began. First with Captain Guillemot from 1880 to 1887, who found the 3 apses of the Byzantine Church, the baptistry, and the medieval central nave. Then followed research of the Dominican fathers, Abel and Vincent, from the French Biblical School of Jerusalem, in 1924 to 1930. They finally uncovered both basilicas and their mosaics. In 1931, the fathers of Betaram constructed the large monastery that dominates the site. Between 1993 and 2005, several new archaeological campaigns took place under the Professor Michele Piccirillo from the Studium Biblicum Franciscanum. The excavations were conducted by Mikko Luhivori and Vincent Michel, with volunteers from all over the world. These new discoveries have enlightened and widened the knowledge we have of the site. Since 1993, the upkeep and the guard of the site of Emmaus Nicopolis, the property of the Carmel of Bethlehem, have been entrusted to the Catholic community of the Beatitudes. Stemming from the charismatic renewal, the community was founded in France in 1973 by 2 married couples. The name of the community comes from Jesus' Sermon of the Mount. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The community gathers under the same roof people from all walks of life: priests, deacons, couples, families, unmarried people, and religious. They all live together, sharing their goods, prayers, particularly adoration of the Blessed Sacrament and liturgical life, and their work. Several dozens of houses of the community exist around the world. Since its origins, the community has been close to the Jewish people. The community is present in Israel since 1975. We come here to work for mutual understanding and reconciliation between Jews and Christians. We welcome anyone who would like to visit and pray at the site.
Okay. Tulog na sila.
Oo, actually, naantok na ako. Yan, done.